Welcome to the Stewart Squared podcast. Today we've got an exciting podcast planned out. Not really planned out because we can't really plan. We're just going to do improv. But Cloudflare did something really interesting, which I don't understand in relationship to AI and AI training. There's some sort of canary in the coal mine, I imagine, happening right now. And there's a relationship between Google and Cloudflare. Google is a giant in the field. They have all their TPUs who are now going and making sure that I can have 1 million tokens in my context window, whereas Claude only has 100,000. All these and they're just like a gorilla. And there's something that happened with Cloudflare in relation to pay per. The bots now need to pay in order to scrape websites. But I want to understand the history. So I've got Cloudflare pulled up here. The history there's founded in 2009 by Matthew Prince. Initially created to track email spam and cyber threats through Project Honeypot. Okay, I got to go understand what Honeypot is. Publicly launched in
Honeypot's exactly what it sounds like. It's like something that attracts the bees and then traps them.
Well, but it's also the intelligence agency myth
There's
thing
also,
as well.
yes, a spy version of a honey trap. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they publicly launched a TechCrunch Disrupt in 2010. So 2011 to 2013, they gained attention by protecting major websites during DDoS attacks, the LulzSec and WikiLeaks. They launched Universal SSL, giving all customers free HTTPS. Maybe that's the entry point. Is like, what is HTTPS and why did it do it? But yeah, the rest is serverless functions. I need to use Cloudflare a lot in my vibe coded tools because there's something about like something that I need a worker for or something like that. So where does the history come in with that? What all that stuff?
You're in my dead zones to some degree, because I haven't really paid a lot of attention to infrastructure and enterprise software in the last 10 or 15 years because I prefer different kinds of investments. And I've done them over the past. And, my history as the editor of Info was all about enterprise systems.
Oh,
Um,
well, let's go there.
but, well, no,
Well,
but that was, when did I, so 30 years
1980s.
ago, I stopped
Yeah,
being editor of Info. So,
yeah. But what was happening?
no,
What was infrastructure and enterprise systems at that time?
so, so we're talking about 1996. The internet became commercial 2 years earlier. Um, so enterprise, enterprise stuff that companies have um, was entirely proprietary, um, and everything ran on Cisco servers. And Cisco is a dominant
Mm,
vendor of servers because of their networking protocols and
interesting.
tools. So they became the platform for the internet. Um, and one of the first things that happened is enterprises needed more bandwidth in order to run the internet and run their systems. Now, their systems primarily in the beginning were like a website. Um, Beyond that, but because they had a website, because stuff was moving to the internet, say in 1996 when I started, it was like 1%. No, it's probably 85%. So there's probably 15% that doesn't touch the open internet.
Mm,
Um, so
mm,
companies have moved the stuff they had on the basements of
yeah.
their buildings out into server farms. And this is where Cloudflare comes in, but eventually, because like 15 years later, we had a high-speed internet. You said they were started in 2010 and announced TechCrunch. Um, so there's something they did, and this is, I haven't studied it. There's something they did that sort of matched themselves to the internet infrastructure, both inside and outside companies.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and I did looked it up here. Let's see if it's still have it.
I'm
Um,
asking that specific question right now as well.
uh, Cloudflare controls a vast and globally distributed infrastructure consisting of data centers in 330 cities across more than 120 countries. That's a year ago, too. Um, but the thing that everybody knows about Cloudflare is they had a system failure and it took down a lot of companies. Like, that just went off, that just turned off. including airlines. And I was flying that day.
Okay.
Um, I was at the Santa Fe airport. It had started earlier, so I knew what was going on, but nobody knew what was going on. So I went to the airport going, kind of got to get there wherever I was going. And um, so the Santa Fe, tiny little Santa Fe airport with two gates and probably five computers was offline. The air traffic control kept working because that's a real-time communication system as opposed to storage and platforms. And it was really interesting because everybody else decided, well, hell, I'll go to the airport and see if they take off. And what's called the blue screen of death was on the monitors because Windows software is basically what went offline. Um, and it was no, that was CrowdStrike. I'm talking about a completely different thing.
No, no, well, June 21st, 2022 was the BGP misconfiguration. And I actually looked this up. So I believe it was the same thing. It's probably Cloudflare and CloudStrike.
And
Uh,
Cloudflare triggered these names. I mean, just come up. Cloudflare and CrowdStrike. I
yeah.
feel like my mouth is full of marbles.
Well, we can talk about that because ChatGPT and O1, there's no reason to call it O1. Like what? Like they're just really bad at names. And we can go into the history of that. But I've got the specific things that Cloudflare does. It's a deep integration with internet infrastructure is what you're talking about. And I would like to ask you, like, what was that infrastructure and why did Cisco fail? But they're positioned at the edge of the internet. They have a reverse proxy role. They have a DNS integration. They have zero trust and internal network replacement, and they have a developer platform, the Cloudflare Workers, um, public
So it
key
was not
infrastructure.
Cloudflare, the thing I was referring to. So forget about that. Forget about what I
Yeah.
was just talking about being at the airport. That was a different company
Mm.
with a similar name. Mhm. So um, I don't want to end up blaming Cloudflare for something CrowdStrike did. And in CrowdStrike's case, it was actually a software update. They were
Uh,
updating all the servers in the system, and the update itself failed, so the whole thing went offline. Different issue. It's the kind of thing that Cloudflare uh, probably can't do
mm,
because what you're talking about, it's embedded in the infrastructure.
mm.
And I don't know how they update. It depends on how they update. I can go
So,
on a
but
little side trip and tell you about the problem with updating software on servers.
yeah, well, let's talk about that. The internet infrastructure in 1996, Cisco was dominant.
Yeah.
Is that related to what you just said?
No, yeah, somewhat. So in a network system, which the internet is, um, you have like the computers, which are servers. They serve computing, whatever they're doing, and they talk to each other. And so then there's pipes,
Mm,
wires, really, little glass fibers mostly that connect them. And so
mm,
there's communications going on between the computers, and the whole system's fine if everybody's talking the same language. Um, what happens and has happened regularly uh, since the internet started carrying enterprise traffic, both enterprise in terms of the communication systems, like the big cable companies or whatever, and those for companies inside themselves and between themselves. Um, and so classically, the problem was, and maybe Cloudflare has solved this problem, and that's why it's such an important company and capable of doing what we really want to talk about, which we haven't gotten to yet. Um, eh, uh, so the problem previously was that the operating systems on the computer, namely Enterprise Windows and various
mm.
versions of Unix, um, um, if you update one server, it's no longer the same as the server next to it. This is a logical problem. So how do you update all of them at the same time without interfering with their operation, which is happening in real time? um, that's really hard to solve logically. And the reason I know about it is we talked to a company, which I believe was bought by Cisco before we could invest in it. With like 11 nerds coming out of MIT who had figured out how to solve this problem, and they would. Uh, so the problem is the disk is spinning, right? The storage disk is spinning, at least in um, hard disks, and um, so if the operating system is running that disk, then how do you update the specific blocks on the disk without screwing up the operating system? And they'd figured out how to, this is conceptual, lift up the operating system, replace everything in the operating system that was sitting there, the version of it that was lifted up, and then on all the servers all at once, drop the operating system back down. You have to, that's very conceptual because that's not actually how it works, but um, and so they prevented the problem of servers being out of line. Um, and they could do it for thousands of servers. They
Mm.
did this on Unix, but it was also applied to Windows. And the so they solved the problem of updating server farms. You have a big building with 10,000 servers in it. How do you make sure all the servers are at the same version? Um, and they could do that. And I think that it can't be just Cisco, so I don't remember exactly who bought them. But it became known how to do it. Let's put it
What?
that way.
Why
And
why is there not just one big server? Why are there 10,000 servers in a data farm?
because the component technologies in computers can only be so big, however you
Mm.
define big in terms of
Mm.
memory or storage or bandwidth. Yeah. And one of them, and this is where it kind of gets interesting intellectually, is if you have 10,000 servers in a building, those servers are talking to each other, and because they're all in the close proximity, can have really big pipes between them, so they can talk to each other in nanoseconds, across all 10,000.
That's interesting.
So there's a communication network inside the building. That means it doesn't have to go very far, and they can have a really big pipe to send it so that it's going really, really fast between the servers. You go outside the building because of the cost of cabling and all that kind of stuff. Um, it, you can't get as high a speed. It's all relative. One of the things that's happened with LLMs is these server farms have really gotten huge because they need a lot of processing power, all the NVIDIA chips out there. So these server farms are getting bigger and bigger and using more and more power, and they're hotter and hotter. So the big issues in building these server farms is not just actually hooking everything together and making it all work together. It's like, where
How
do
do
you
you
get
cool?
the power?
Yeah.
And how do you keep it cool? Um, which is really messing with things because, of course, it's reversed all of the savings that we've gotten in
Oh,
energy. And it's also, they put them next to rivers to cool them down, and it's heating the rivers up. It's scale. It's a scale problem, and it's pretty. There it gets interesting. The details are less.
that
So
that is a very interesting point. I want to bring up this meme that I got of the server farms. I'm not going to sure if I can do it, but while I go and look for that, I want to talk about server farms about networking versus server farms about compute. What I got from what you just said is the server farms from 2001, maybe earlier, maybe there are server farms earlier than that with Cisco. They were about networking. That was the main problem, was networking all these things together. Now the main problem is about compute and bringing a whole bunch of compute and networking all that compute together. Is that right?
I say you have to step very carefully through these terms. So you said compute. First of all, I pronounce it compute, but you have computers. And computers compute. That's why they're called computers, at least in English. L'ordinateur in French. Which doesn't mean compute. Whole side trip, but um, so you have the processor, and the processor has many different components. It used to be that the processors were separate. You'd have a microprocessor and a graphics processor and a memory and blah, blah, blah. So they'd all be separate. And how they've made them faster and faster and cheaper is by integrating all of them into single chips. So then you have these kind of
Uh,
multi-processor chips that have a CPU, but they have everything else on them too. Um, so that makes them smaller and smaller, and the communication between the different pieces of the chips goes really, really fast. Oh, you put something up on screen. Um, so as everything gets more and more integrated, um, the computers get smaller and smaller, or can get smaller and smaller, or they get really big and fast. And so it's a design decision about what the application of the computer is. So what's packed into a server farm now, maybe tens of thousands of computers, but inside those computers, there's tens, millions, trillions of transistors. And so, it's scaling on both all dimensions at once. That's why scaling is such an interesting logical problem. So what did
Um,
you put up here? AI
so I got
cluster type,
six different
superstar,
types of
star.
AI metro
Yeah.
areas. There's a big map for the listeners. There's a big map. You can find it by the Brookings analysis of job posting data from Lightcast, or just DM me. Would be specific in the DM about what you want. It's got these giant star hubs. Then there's
Now
superstars.
on YouTube, people can see this, right? Go watch us on YouTube. You'll be able to see
Yes,
this.
that's
You
true.
just share screen as get shared. Okay.
Yep. That'll be on YouTube. So go find us on YouTube for Stuart Squared. So the big superstars are only what I imagine in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and maybe it's the East Bay. But then you
Well,
got a
just
bunch
look
of
at that. They're only in San Francisco,
Mhm.
apparently. At least the big clusters. Superstars are all in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah,
And then the star hubs are spread out, in major metros, emerging centers,
yeah.
focus movers, NASA adopters, and others. I don't know what the other things are. But there's
Um,
this huge one called Star something. Star, not Star
in
Base, but there's
Nashville.
one being built in, no, there's one being built in Texas that
Oh,
of
okay. What's that
Sam
one?
Altman
I'm gonna go look that one up.
and Sun San and Trump all announced at the same time at the White House, just like a few months ago. Um, it's $500 billion data center or something like that. Um, and they're building one of these superstars in Texas, but all of the existing ones, of course, this is where Silicon Valley plays its role. All of the leading edge research from the base all the way up, because NVIDIA is also there. So all the microprocessor, all the the production technologies have moved over seashore, but the software, the high level thinking, all the way up to how you build an LLM and
Mm,
do generative AI, are all in Silicon Valley, which we've referred to previously as uh, a fantasy, I guess. But we had that conversation about that
yeah.
guy that wrote a post about there's only 200 people that know what's going on. They all live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Weird. Yep.
so that's where it all starts, and that's why that on the left, that big dark blue cluster is all around San Francisco Bay Area.
So when did it start? When did those star hubs in the major metro areas start being getting built? Was that in the 1990s or was that in the 2000s?
It just really got kicked off. So I'll put it in context. If you'll remember, the internet bubble burst in 2000. And so from 96 to 2000, all these companies going public, everything's like bursting at the seams like this. But the internet was very nascent. And one of the problems was connecting big cities together and indeed
Mm,
connecting countries together. So the undersea cables and stuff like that. That was a hot business right when the internet bubble burst. And
mm,
it was usually referred to as the optical components business. So you have to think, okay, you've got this fiber, and you can stuff a lot of stuff into the fiber. The fiber's brittle, doesn't bend very well.
mm.
So they have to like straight runs. And so the way you would do that is you would dig trenches. And so there was this massive trench building exercise going on in the US exactly when the bubble burst. So those are the two big telecoms companies like Nortel and Level 3 and stuff like that who are doing this, who are building it. And they're usually building them along the rights of way for railroads because they pre-existed and there's nobody like living next to the track. So they could bury the cable without disturbing anybody. They could do it close enough to the tracks, even the trains could keep going. Um, and those have to be straight because railroads don't bend very well either. Trains don't bend. So they had to go, and they need to go through a switching mechanism to change direction. And so it's perfect analog for, digital communication. So they this massive thing, and all the companies were doing went out of business, but the fiber was still there. And it was called dark fiber for a number of years because you need an optical component that you plug the fiber into that turns it back into, because it's light. It's not digital, it's analog signal. I think you can call it analog. Um, and so it has to be converted back into digital form so that the computer can understand it. And that was the
Mm-hmm.
industry that was taking off. And it was actually a delayed reaction to the internet crash because the optical companies still were being funded for a year after the internet crash. Um,
Mm.
and it wasn't like until 9 months after the stock market crash happened that Cisco stood up and said, well, we're not going to have a very good quarter in the first quarter of 2001. And their stock crashed. Um, and the whole optical business crashed. Well, the venture capitalists said, oh shit, and stopped investing in optical components. But the fiber was still there. So it all got worked out during the 2000 to 2010 period. And all those assets got bought really cheap. So
Man,
people started building out these server farms. That's when I really started stuffing a lot of data in the pipes, conceptually speaking, and building these super fast networks. Um, Now, at the time, super fast is like a crawl compared to today because
yeah,
that's just kept on going, including, one of the things that's going on right now is the Russians think the Norwegians or the Finns, I can't remember exactly what, are, or maybe, no, the Russians are suspected of dragging dragging anchors across the cables to cut them and mess with Western comms.
Chinese
And
as
the
well.
Finns and the Finns are figuring this out and then figuring out how to repair the cables and trying to catch the Russians doing. It's like, that's all about some really big pipes sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And up there, it's whatever it is,
So
the upper.
so this dark fiber, I have a question later to research is who were the investors who went in and bought all that stuff? That's an interesting question, but that's not the question I want to ask because I want to go
Yeah.
into our eventual lead up to the Cloudflare, which is an AI, which is so you had all these dark fiber things, assets bought, and then the rise of Cloudflare. So my
So,
question
so
about
let me slow
yep,
it down a little bit.
yep,
Dark fiber is dark because there's no light in it. Right?
okay,
Light is what goes through a fiber optic cable. Right? Through light. And um, uh, uh, and then there's successive reasons for the infrastructure to get adopted and improved. And the first one was the internet itself. Then you had the Web 2.0. Um, yeah, Web 2.0 was where sort of the graphic part took off. You could do video streaming, and you could really pump
mm,
high throughput applications across the network, and that's where the dark fiber became lit. But there
mm,
was a period of time relatively short between um, uh, probably really in like 2004 to 2008, which was the financial crisis, but the different issue, where all those assets got bought and redeployed, and not
mm.
redeployed because they were fixed in the ground. So, bought by different people at a different cost basis so that they could invest in the stuff that happens on top of it. It's a bit like cell towers, and that's a whole nother topic. Originally, the carriers we're back on screen here, but originally the telecoms carriers, the wireline companies, built their own cell towers. And
Mm,
but at some point, people realized that that's not a good thing for them to do. That's like construction, not uh, doing communications. So other people bought the cell towers from them and became huge cell tower companies, right? So things get split up as they scale. And that has happened in the internet as well. There's like, this is actually where Cloudflare comes in is, they're a specialized company that
manages.
manages all that stuff you've talked about. And um,
So I, the
so there's
dark
like different ways. So crypto is one of the ways, right? So then you get into the teens, there's social media. one of the key things Facebook was able to do was to make your newsfeed update in real time. I think we've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
you'd sit there and you'd post something. Well, it could only be posted to your friends, not
Yeah.
to anybody, right? So in real time, Facebook had to figure out who of the 200 million people to send that update
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
and do that constantly for all 200 million people. That was a real-time application. That was kind of the first wave. And that wasn't just um, Facebook, all the stuff that was going on. And then crypto came along, and there was uh, bit mining, or whatever they call Bitcoin
Yeah.
mining, or
Yeah.
um, and so the blockchain was an
Mm.
incredibly inefficient computing resource, and so you had to like overcompensate by building more and more of it. And and then after crypto, it became generative AI. So that brings us all the way through all of the waves that have happened to the point now where we're building these gigantic superstars. Um, and it's there a worldwide map for this? Because then
Well, no,
where are the other supers?
that's what I'm going to go research later because that you just gave me a great clue about how Bitcoin probably led to even more decentralization in data centers because all of a sudden now you have Russian non-state actors who are probably really state actors, and then same thing in China. So that probably led to a huge incentive to build data centers. But before going that, I want to fact check my understanding. So in 2004 to 2008, that fiber was used to connect these star hubs together. Is that
That's correct.
okay?
Generally speaking, alongside railway rights of way.
And that's terrestrial, and then you have the deep sea cables, which are a completely different thing. You've got Starlink, you've got cell phone towers, but then but that or the fiber was probably continued to be laid, and now they're all connecting these focused movers and these nascent adopters, and so it's all connecting terrestrially on the ground, but then at the same time globally. And if you could talk about the global thing while I go search for a data center map around the world, that would be great.
So yeah, and there's different forms of communications that are happening at the same time. So when you say terrestrial, you have to be careful because a cell tower is terrestrial for their cellular network, and how the cell towers are connected together as part of that underground infrastructure. So you can't send things through the air as fast as you can over a wire.
Mm.
Fundamental physical principle. Right? You can control the wire, and you can manage all of the data that's being transmitted, regardless whether it's copper or fiber. And so your high-speed communications um, always have to go through underground. I mean, you could build lots of, you know, telephone poles and try to do it that way, but it just works better when it's underground because, you still got to drive over it and walk on it and stuff like that. So, or underwater. And so there are the massive cables that are beneath the Pacific Ocean that were laid, uh, by countries. I mean, there are companies, but uh, so there is an enormous one, the big one, and it's not a one, it's like a bundle or a whole set of cables between like San Francisco and Tokyo. Right?
Uh
There's
huh.
two
Oh, interesting.
regional comm centers that, and so the first cables, that was, I believe, one of them, and then there were cables laid across from like New York City to London to France and between countries, and so it's a network. It has to exist everywhere all at once. Um, and so you don't really have it until all that stuff's been built out.
So we got a few
Yeah,
maps
I don't.
there.
Yeah, I may have
Um,
gone too fast for me, but yeah.
but Apple owns in Denmark. Apple owns a data center in Denmark. How many data centers does Apple? Is Apple a cloud computing? Did they vertically integrate their
Yeah,
cloud computing?
and Microsoft. There's one in Microsoft project, Value Vision. I'm here, sitting here reading. So some of these are proprietary to a company, and some of them are state owned or state controlled.
Yeah,
Um, and
man, that's
what
so
are these?
interesting.
What are these? I'm trying to figure out
Uh,
what's the
so
title of the
the
slide.
migration to the cloud, world's largest data centers. So these are the world's largest data centers. But it's
Yeah,
not. There's not a lot of
this seems
information.
a
But
little old.
Yeah,
Just
this
seems a little old.
2018. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we need a new map, but I think it helps us in terms of this is 2023. Okay, this is okay, this is a good one. All right. So we got Sao
yeah.
Paulo
Look at that
here.
huge one. Where is that? New York City
Beijing.
is the one that goes up
Oh,
to the top.
no, Northern Virginia. I knew who that was.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
no, it's not just the government. There's a huge number of, it's become a data center. Just like Beijing is a huge one.
uh,
Ours is bigger than theirs still.
oh, the
Um,
government needs its own data centers in order to
yeah,
have total privacy and security.
secrecy. Yeah, secrecy.
Oh, interesting.
Um, yeah, in fact, one of the reasons for that big tall thing there is the CIA contracted with Amazon to build a data center based on Amazon Web Services or AWS that is not part of any other network. It's its own
Oh,
network. And the only way you can keep something secret is to have an air gap. It's called air gapped computing.
yeah.
And you can't have any connectors to it, right? It has to exist entirely by itself and not be connected to any other network, or people can figure out how to get to it.
Wow. Okay, that's really mind blowing. It almost there's so
So you
much
have to build
there.
a parallel network. Now, think of China has what do they call it? The Great Internet Wall or whatever it is. And they've done it for the entire country. They've air gapped there, basically.
Yeah, interesting.
So in theory, you can use what are they called? Virtual proxies, firewalls,
So
VPNs, virtual private network. You can use VPNs to isolate yourself, but there's still a physical connection, so you can break through a VPN.
so what I'm gathering from you is that the networking is crazy complex. Air gapping it would be complex, but now vibe coding. So UK just released legislation yesterday saying that they're going to do age verification, but according to me, it has nothing to do with age verification. What it really does is has a lot to do with the government getting all of the biometric data on its citizens so that it can surveil them. And Australia tried a similar thing. UK has now done it. So now all companies doing business in the UK will need to provide all of that. So I'm getting more prepared because I'm not planning on doing anything legal. I just like my privacy. I like my sovereignty over my own data. And I think it's a fundamental tenet of the US government that governments need to be basically the sovereignty is in the people, not in the government. And the people decide what the government should do.
Wow.
Yeah. I would love
You're
to.
going
Yeah,
philosophical on me here,
yeah.
but
Hmm.
good luck. I've given up. I don't even try to. I mean, I kind of hope my bank has good security so that people can't look at my money,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
or
no,
in a
they're
holistic way,
definitely
because I,
they're
of course,
definitely looking your
spread it
money.
out.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
definitely looking your money. The
But they see money in
KYC and
aggregate,
AML.
Yeah. Know your customer and whatever the other one is.
Yeah. And
Um,
right now I don't have any problem with the US government doing it, but my worry is that we're the edge of empire. And as empires collapse, then they start to do crazy stuff, which has already been happening. And so I think we're just on very, very thin ice in terms of what the governments all around the world are doing. But that's kind of a separate thing. So there's a VPN, so I can now build a VPN. Now I got my Raspberry Pi. I can't turn the Raspberry Pi on, and I've been trying for months to turn it on. But I'll get there. I'll eventually get to my Raspberry Pi being on. So because we have like 20, 30 minutes left, I want to go into what happened in late 2000s. Web 2.0 started to cloud centers. All of a sudden, the game theory is different because now you don't need your own VPN. You don't need your own server. You can just trust the cloud server to do all this different stuff. And then that leads to where we are today with LLMs, because all like 99.9% is happening in the cloud in these giant data centers that we're talking about. And now Cloudflare just told everybody they have to pay to scrape. And Google sitting there, Google recognizes that there's going to be a fundamental shift to the behavior on the internet. I now no longer search. I found these images via Google search, but that's the only time I use Google now. And basically, I am outside of Google's ad network. I'm not representative of most people. Google is building these LLMs, but there's going to be a strange shift that is going to affect them, and they're going to fight that, and they have a lot of money and other things like that. And then there's this relationship between Cloudflare, and one of the things I sent you is that Cloudflare CEO is telling Google that it needs to do something, and I'm not sure what it is. We could approach this from the sort of like giant business, the game theory of these giant businesses and the individuals involved and how they tell people things secretly or publicly and all those things, or we can talk about the technology. What's your take on what's happening?
So there's two separate issues intersecting here.
Mm.
One is that the perception is that with LLMs, which are massive databases,
Yeah.
not structured, um,
Mm.
that get processed, not in real time. Um, and there's the rumor is that ChatGPT 5 is coming out in the next few weeks. Um, and then a lot of people seen it, and it's like a big deal. So from 4 to 5, from 3.5 to 4, all these interim steps that happens for all of the LLMs, and they have to. The dividing line is they have to go train data using these massive resources to be able to predict the next token,
Mm.
and that's sort of a very simple process that goes on. Um, so, uh, as with every generation of enterprise infrastructure we've just been talking about, um, there's always changes in who provides services on that. And Cloudflare started in 2010, so only 15 years old, is now, according to what I looked up on Perplexity, is now basically installed on 20% of the world's infrastructure, meaning the servers and processors that are manipulating all of the data. 20% is a pretty high percentage for anybody. Back in the internet days, Cisco was 90% of the servers that were running web servers. Um,
Mm.
it's no one's actually achieved that level of penetration um, since. Um, but 20% is a lot. AWS accounts for maybe majority, 50%, plus or minus 10 or 20. I don't really know the number. Um, but AWS is a dominant vendor in providing web services, Amazon Web Services. And there's a bunch of different pieces of that. So they have a tremendously high market share in the market for uh, web services. So Cloudflare at 20% is for whatever they do. Like we haven't kind of figured out what they do yet, but they do something that's really important for running HTTPS. Um, and uh, oof, this is not good for YouTube. This is
It's too
small to
small.
read. Yeah.
I'll,
Um,
I'll, so Cloudflare has 26 to 41% estimated market share. Amazon CloudFront has 24 to 27%. Akamai has around 0.3%.
yeah,
JS Deliver has around 28%. So those are the main guys, basically.
JSON. Yeah. So JS is JSON.
It's a CDN, Content Delivery Network. Got it. So
Yeah,
they
content
that's what they
delivery is
do.
one of the things that you do in a network. Um,
Oh,
but that's only for, if you're producing a video network. The content is the video that goes out and you
yeah.
push everything out to the edge so it's as responsive as possible for any customer. That's the concept of content delivery and actually content delivery network or CDN. Akamai was the first one to do that. And
Oh,
now they're like a minor player.
interesting.
Um, the uh, or word.
Well, I mean, it's got tons of follow up questions because Cloudflare is delivering content to the network. I'm going to research this later, but if you have anything interesting to say about what did networks do in the 90s and what do networks do now, you said content delivery is a big part of that. I guess we should probably connect it to AI as well because
Well,
videos
I
good.
mean,
Yeah,
before you go there, Netflix is a
yeah,
tremendous
yeah.
consumer
Okay,
of
yeah.
network bandwidth because it's streaming. Everything it does is streaming this high quality video, which tends to consume a lot of network. bandwidth. And uh, but and YouTube also. Um, they're the two biggest components of video streaming right now. And
Yeah.
the processing of LLMs, i.e., the thing that happens between when they start a new LLM and the time they release it, consumes a lot of bandwidth, and they're all doing that at the same time. But that's actually hidden from view because it's not a real time process. But then they're also serving up the uh, tokens, and serving tokens up is itself a real-time application
Hmm.
that consumes maybe as much or more than video streaming. That would be an interesting
Whoa,
thought.
interesting.
Is
Okay.
um, processing the tokens is one thing, and then serving the results up is another thing. Uh, there's probably a term for that, which I have not learned. Um, and so but you're still doing everything that used to be done, right? So Akamai is still there because it is still a content delivery network for websites. Um, um, but every new generation consumes more and more stuff than the prior generation. So every time you go through some of these, so artificial generative AI is a huge consumer now of bandwidth and resources.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe bigger than video streaming. That's an interesting question. But
I, I'm gonna research
because
it later.
video streaming is they store the video and then they serve it up when somebody asks for it. So it's a fairly static application. Whereas people asking for the answers to questions, like we're doing with ChatGPT or other chatbots, um, it's and actually, this is a little bit relevant to what you're talking about with Cloudflare's new rules. Um, the Because who's profiting from the fact that these uh, predictive tokens are being served? I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but when you ask a question, it consumes tremendous infrastructure to answer that
Mm,
question through generative AI,
mm,
through LLMs. And so you ask a simple question like, what's the weather in Tokyo? It's like burns a lot of power to give you the answer to that. And there are billions of people now asking that stupid little questions like that um, before you even get to the research-based chain of thought kind of stuff. Um, so it's hugely more compute intensive um, uh, to serve up answers to natural language questions. Um, and it's scaling much faster. The perception has been that that will bypass the Google search. And Google's own Gemini is doing that. They put it in front of your Google search and it gives you a generative AI answer. Um, but somehow it's not harmed the use of Google to provide search without Gemini.
mm.
Oh, this is near real time, right? People are trying to figure this out while we're
Yeah.
sitting here talking about it and flailing around.
Well,
So Cloudflare has enough control over its portion of this system to be able to say, "Oh, we can make some money off this," and I'm
oh,
very Google-like money too because you pay, pennies, maybe micro pennies per click or per token or whatever the hell however they measure um, that pay for what do you call it? Scrape, pay for scrape.
yeah. Bots.
So every time somebody scrapes something, Cloudflare, I guess Cloudflare is in the way of that, and they can charge a toll on it. And boy, that means you kind of want to own stock in
Cloudflare.
Cloudflare.
Only here.
Cloudflare
You can only get it
is it a
here.
public
This.
company?
Yeah. Uh,
Is it a public company?
yeah. Definitely. Cloudflare is definitely. I mean, well, I don't know that for sure, but I'm 98%
Well,
confidence. Yeah.
if they pull it off, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to use Google to do it. Stock. It is, and its shares are $198 per. That's year to date. So it went public this year. No, that's this. I've got it like 5 years. Early estate. No, it's been public for a couple of years. Stock peaked after it went public, went down, and then has climbed right back up to its peak. So it's at its peak right now,
Mm,
and is
mm,
worth $69 billion, which
mm.
is, minor stakes for a company that has that kind of control. Might be a good buy. We do not provide investment advice.
Yeah, yeah. It's
We
not
do
investment
not.
advice, and you're not talking your own book either, because I imagine you don't own it based on what we just talked about. So
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant rabbit holes just come up. The Cloudflare. Okay, yeah. So here's another thing I found out about this week, which is I used to work at a company that does really important data labeling. Scale AI was a competitor, and they just got bought by Facebook. And all of a sudden,
It didn't get
there's
bought by the way.
sorry, yeah,
They
yeah,
just
acquired, yeah, yeah,
Facebook
yeah,
bought half of it. Meta bought half of it for
yeah.
$14.9 billion.
To resist to as we discussed in earlier versions of the show, just to get around the DOJ. But
And to get Alexander Wang to
yes,
take the job as the leader of
well,
the
but that
superintelligence lab.
leads
Yeah.
into what I'm about to say, which is that there's a secret third thing called Surge AI that has been all of a sudden in the background. With I didn't hear about them until the founder just went on a podcast with 20 VC, Harry Stebbings, and so Surge AI is in all of the companies that both Scale and Invisible, and the founder went on to pontificate about how amazing they are at doing this, which I actually buy. I do think that but he was also dominating the conversation in a way that is aimed towards marketing goals. And so he was definitely speaking his own book. But very interesting interview. I would recommend everybody go check it out. And the relationship between what we were just talking about is that this data labeling is so important. He called Scale AI. He didn't explicitly say that, but he called Scale AI a body shop. A body shop, just throw a million bodies at it. And he was saying that they basically just go hire PhDs. As soon as you have a PhD on your thing, they'll just hire you and fit you into the system, which leads to really poor data quality. And I buy that. I believe that that is actually accurate, and that they have actually figured out a way to do high quality data labeling. And with these bots and with these kind of things, this is now with the Cloudflare's announcement. This is going to be really important. Is high quality data and human in the loop data labeling with a bunch of algorithms and other things to make sure that that data is high quality. What do you
Clean
think?
data has always been important,
Mm.
but it started out being impossible.
Why?
So
Whoa.
because people entered the data, but if you're sitting there typing and you make typos and you don't know what you're doing, and so the original source data came from humans. Like the classic problem that's pretty easy to understand is songs. So you have you have a lot of metadata around a song, and there's the data itself, which is the sound, the music.
Mm.
But then you also have lyrics and you have a recording. All three are controlled separately. And back in the day before computers, this was all done like on
Mm.
not punch cards, on little index cards. It's like, originally there's somebody down in the basement like writing all this stuff down. So then they had to get from those cards into digital form. And that process was poor in terms of quality control. So when we ended up with like Napster, servers full of this stuff, um, the information about the songs was in poor condition, and so there were companies that started fixing that. Mostly the music labels themselves, but that they were not smart in terms of digital technology, so it took them a long time to figure out how to label data. To the point now where if you're playing songs like in CarPlay or Android Play or whatever the equivalent is, it'll show the title as remastered. It says in parentheses remastered, and then the title. You can't see the title of the song because the screen's not big enough to contain remastered in parentheses. And that's because the dumb music companies had to separate the remastered version from the original version. So they put it right in the title. It's not a piece of metadata, but it's actually in the title. And so, I mean, that problem of data clarity, cleanliness is just music, which is like a $5 or $6 billion business. Um,
Whoa.
Imagine that applied to everything. Like salespeople are recording a call and they're sitting there trying to do the call, and and meanwhile they're supposed to also record the call so it can be aggregated across the company, so you know what your potential sales are, sales pipeline. So data quality is really critical. Now you're talking about these things that go out and scrape every piece of information known to mankind, um, and who knows how good the data was when they found it somewhere. And so data quality is really critical, because if you're going to predict the next token and that's your primary function, um, your quality of identifying the token is based on how good the data was in the first place.
Mm,
So yeah,
man.
it's an absolutely critical central question when we become real time, all digital, all seeing, all believing.
So that's what we can do the next episode on, because that just is like a whole rabbit hole that I want to really bro in on. Is
And just to
the
say, you mentioned the Surge AI, which I had never heard about.
yeah, that nobody's ever
It
heard of
was
them.
bootstrapped. They didn't raise any
Yeah,
venture capital, and they have a
yeah,
billion of revenue.
yeah,
It's like, wow.
yeah. It's
And
pretty mind
they're
blowing
trying to
for
raise
me
it. They're
because I
they're trying
thought,
to raise they're trying to raise $1 billion.
oh, that's why he's going on the shows. Ah, got it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
raising money, which will
Oh, and that's
probably
why
be
Harry
like a
Stebbings
feeding
from
frenzy.
that's why he went to on to 20 VC, is because 20 VC also invests. I wonder how he deals with the fact that he invests in the companies that he interviews. I'm going to do research on that.
It should
Uh,
be disclosed right up front. I think it is, because I think he started as an investor and then started doing the podcast to talk about his investments, something
wow.
like that. I don't know much about it, but it would not be a problem as long as you tell everybody, right?
Yeah.
Disclosure is the solution to conflicts of interest, at least
Um,
traditionally. Trump doesn't seem to really like that, but no, yeah, he does. He discloses everything. He doesn't hide anything that we can tell.
the
Although
meme
that's the
coins,
Epstein problem. Just so when people are listening to the Epstein things going on right now, and like they're suspecting that he did not disclose his conflicts in the Epstein thing, and
the same
that's
with
why the
Peter
MAGA base is
Thiel,
like pissed off. It's like he's hiding something. And
because Epstein's whole thing. This is another future interview we can do about international capital networks, and how those work. Because Peter Thiel took $40 million from Epstein, and I imagine that recent disclosure is related to the fact that maybe Trump didn't do it.
not
Um,
40 billion,
40
because
million. I said 40
Epstein,
million. At
oh,
40 million.
million,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Yeah.
probably one of his funds. Yeah, it's like an LP. Um, the yeah, that's one of the issues is like, so we're raising money. Should we
Yeah.
raise money in Saudi Arabia?
Ooh, interesting.
Uh, well, my problem is I don't really want to have to fly to Saudi Arabia to raise money. That's like, I don't, whatever, MBS and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of money out there. And so these huge funds, the ones that have billions of dollars, they do spend a lot of time going to the Middle East.
Sovereign. Wait, what? MBS? You said MBS. What is that?
Mohammed bin Salam,
Okay.
the chief executive of Saudi Arabia, so to speak, the dude that had that Adam Khashoggi dismember. He's
Whoa.
not considered a
Oh,
nice
got it.
guy.
Got it.
He's
Interesting. Man,
called
it's so
MBS
crazy.
because nobody can pronounce his whole name.
Man, it's so crazy because my mind, like, it's just so crazy that so much money and innovation is inside of the Middle East. We have the
There's no
Israelis.
innovation in the Middle East. They're just
No,
buying
no,
stuff.
Israelis. The unit
Oh,
unit
okay.
2820 whatever.
Little tiny
Yeah,
thing, yeah. Which is
yeah,
primarily generated by the fact they have to defend themselves against all these
yeah.
people. So they're
And
very
that
they're as sophisticated in their cybersecurity and their military procurement as we are.
well, it may be more, right? I mean, are they more? Is That's a good question. Are they more sophisticated
Well,
than the U.S.
they
government?
only have there's only 5 or 6 million people in Israel, so they don't really have the economy to be more. For them to be at our level is pretty amazing, right? Because most of Europe's way behind and China's only slightly behind. And here they are, a little country with only 5 or 6 million people in a very hostile place, but matching us. I think they're what's it called? Mossad
Yeah,
is
yeah, Mossad. Yeah.
every bit as good and potentially better at secret intelligence. That's more attitude than technology, but even their technologies. pretty damn good. Their ability, the Iron Dome, that's, Trump is trying to copy Iron Dome.
Yeah.
But if you're a little country with only a few million people, doing an Iron Dome is much easier than the Golden Dome that they want to pull off in the US, which is kind of bullshit because most of the missiles can't make it to us anyway. The only
Mm.
ones we have to worry about are the big countries, not the little ones.
And it would be hard to test. I imagine the U.S. government can test missile delivery. That is we've just opened up like 4 or 5 different rabbit holes that I want to talk about next time. But the next time will be data labeling. The history of data and what is data. It's so hard it's very meta question, like what is data? And it all depends on what you're doing, right? I've been trying to figure out what is
And
data.
there is the concept of metadata. There's data and metadata, which is data about data. Metadata is data about data, right? The fact that a song lasts so many minutes and seconds, the fact that it's number 1, 2, or 3 or on a CD, that it's, that's all metadata. It's information about data. I like music because we all listen to it,
Yeah.
and there's a huge industry that it's all data. Music and money are all data, and
Do you have do you have any memories? We'll end at the last question. Do you have any memories of me using Napster at our house in Edgewood? Because I have a stark memory of me downloading Napster music in 2001
I,
probably.
I was too, and I think we had a conversation about that. What the problem was with Napster, that it was copyrighted material and people were
Yeah.
just stealing it blindly, and you were going like, "Yeah, okay, Dad, whatever."
Okay, boomer. Just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I said to you something like, "Well, my job is based on copyrights.
I remember very clearly.
Everything I write is copyrighted, and so if you steal music, why don't you just steal my stuff too?"
There's a whole
So
other rabbit hole about IP. Uh,
yeah.
Man, Meow Wolf and IP is a really interesting question. But we won't go down that rabbit hole because you're on
No,
vacation.
no, not yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but uh, yeah, it's raining and I'm on the East Coast, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. Tune in next week. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.